welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and we're going to change gears and go to something that is extremely important. We have by phone Michael Johnson. He is president of the Slavic Gospel Association. He's been president since 2017, but he started with the SGA back in 1997, so he's been with them for a while. Prior to that, he had a career in business and management and so forth. And so let's go to Michael. Michael, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, listen, the Slavic Gospel Association and just Ukraine and the things going on in Eastern Europe are just in turmoil now. Tell us a little bit about the history of the Slavic Gospel Association.
Well, the Slavic Gospel Association was established in 1934 by a man named Peter Danica. He was an immigrant from the country of Belarus. He came to this country, was saved through the ministry of the Moody Church in Chicago, and in 1934 established the ministry in response to what he was seeing as the growing persecution of the Christians in the Soviet Union. So during those years, in those countries, our main ministry was the covert distribution of Bibles and Christian literature. But we also had a significant Russian language radio ministry that was broadcast in partnership with FEBC and Transworld Radio and HCJB. And so we were broadcasting Christian radio programming through shortwave radio, probably 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at a time when the Soviet government said that they wanted to eradicate all forms of religion from their countries and put the last Bible under glass in a museum in St. Petersburg. So the Lord really allowed this ministry to keep those nations open to the gospel. And so when the wall came down, early 90s, we shifted our strategy, and we partnered with one of the largest group of evangelical churches in those countries, the Baptist evangelical churches, and we do a variety of things. We've established a number of theological seminaries. We train thousands and thousands of pastors every year. We sponsor 300 to 400 national church planting ministries. But we're also connected to roughly 6,000 churches across those countries, all of whom are doing vital work in their various cities, towns, and villages. So we help them with children's ministry, compassion ministry, humanitarian aid distribution, Bible distribution, things of that nature. So I know that we're here to talk a bit about Ukraine. In Ukraine, there's roughly 2,500 churches that we're connected to, spread all across those countries, and they're making a significant impact in what is happening as a result of the invasion. So
with the Slavic Gospel Association, do you work with a range of different churches and organizations, or do you focus on one thing?
Well, we focus on basically we exist to serve the churches in those countries. So we don't have missionaries necessarily in those countries. What we have are nationals. We have administrative offices in Moscow, Kiev, and Minsk, Belarus, which allows us to get resources into all throughout those countries. So we're for all intents and purposes, we're an equipping ministry. So our partnership is with the national churches in those countries, helping them to build their churches. My favorite verse is found in John 4, where Jesus says, "For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor." So we have the privilege of entering into the labor of these wonderful churches that were persecuted for so many years, and giving our supporters an opportunity to enter into their labor as well.
So in Ukraine, are you hearing from the churches? What are you hearing from the churches that are there and the struggles that they are facing right now? We're in constant communication with the leadership of the churches in those countries, as well as with the churches on the ground. And basically, when the war started, we had all the infrastructure in place to begin to distribute humanitarian aid and other resources into those countries through this network of churches. So right now, I think we're up to about almost 6 million individual meals that have been distributed through those churches.
And, many of those pastors and those leaders did stay behind, particularly in a lot of those war-torn areas. These are really courageous people. And so the way we're able to get humanitarian aid into their hands is either transferring funds to them, so where possible they could purchase food and resources locally and distribute it to people that are in need. Also, we're working with the Polish Baptist churches, and we're funding the importation of humanitarian aid through large semis that are crossing the border into Ukraine and then going to the various church locations and distributing it that way. But from our standpoint, it's not just a matter of feeding people. It's a matter of ministering to them both in word and deed in their time of distress.
We've discussed it several times here on Point of View. We had Vladimir Pickman, a Messianic rabbi, who is based in Germany, but he works in those areas. And a few months ago, I had in several people who are missionaries to Ukraine or Romania in those areas, trying to help various churches and so forth. And we were getting a sense at the time of the struggles and the challenges they had, as so many people were fleeing the war zones and moving west into the neighboring countries. I think some have shifted back now. But have those kinds of needs changed? What's changing on the ground, or is it essentially the same as the initial outset of the invasion?
Well, certainly when the invasion took place, there were many people lost their homes and tried to make their way to western Ukraine. And so in that case, there was kind of an underground railroad kind of a situation where we were helping churches where people would leave eastern Ukraine and they would make their way to a certain town or village, and they would they spend the night at the church. They would be ministered to with food and spiritual aid as well. And then the next day they'd move on to the next location until they made it to the Polish border and out of the country. And so, millions of people fled Ukraine, but many of them are coming back now, and they are trying to get back to a sense of normalcy. But it's difficult to know what's going to happen because, the conflict still exists, and Putin has sworn that he wants to take Kiev. So it's everybody's on edge, but many people, when they got to Europe, they didn't know where they were going to go. They didn't know what was going to happen to them, so they just turned around and came back to their homes. And in many cases, their homes had been destroyed. So it's a really difficult situation, but the churches are trying to do everything they can to minister to these people.
I've had several people tell me that Ukraine is one of the most churched areas in that part of Europe, with so many churches around. And is that your experience as well?
Yeah. In the case of the Baptist churches that we serve, there are more churches per capita. They have more churches per capita in Ukraine than the other countries over there. And a lot of people do consider Ukraine to be the buckle of the Bible Belt in that part of the world. And so one of the views is that there are many Christians have left, and they've gone into Eastern Europe and made their way into Western Europe. And I mean, these are really strong Christians. And some people feel like, God is using this as a way to perhaps bring revival to some of the European countries.
That actually takes me to my next question, because I had heard that the invasion actually created for lack of a better term, a mini revival, as people were searching for answers, ultimate answers, and returning to church, and that there was some revival going on there.
Yes, there is, absolutely. And again, I mean, we work directly with the leadership of the Ukrainian Baptist Union, and in fact, they just got off the phone with one of their leaders a few minutes ago. So what they're reporting is they're reporting a significant increase of people that are attending their churches, people that have never stepped foot in a church before in their lives, because of the ministry of those churches to people in those communities. Many people are now attending churches. Many people have come to faith in Christ, and many of those churches, where they're allowed to hold services, are just flourishing right now. And so for us, we've equipped them, helped them with humanitarian aid, but we also help them with, children's camps. So, this year, I think the Ukrainian Baptist churches, they've held at least, 250 to 300 Christian summer camps, and we're helping to scholarship kids to go into those camps. And then the kids, connect with the church. They attend Sunday school. They attend, Christmas celebrations, and the family eventually comes in, and
Michael,
and it's a wonderful evangelistic experience.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Michael Johnson with the Slavic Gospel Association back in just a minute.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. My guest is Michael Johnson. He is president of the Slavic Gospel Association. And Michael, you mentioned in passing that you have an office in Moscow, and I'm wondering, how is that situation going right now, given the fact that the Russian Orthodox Church, the patriarch there, is blessing the invasion and has not separated, I don't believe, from Vladimir Putin, even though some of the people in the church have. What can you tell us about what's happening there in Moscow?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that the churches and the people in all those countries, their foundations have been shaken right now, mm-hmm. and obviously, many people have taken sides from a political standpoint in one form or another. But for us, our sole focus is serving those churches. So, for example, when the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan broke out in the conflict area, we were funneling humanitarian aid through the churches on both sides. And in this particular situation, there are many people, Ukrainians, as well as Russian nationals living in Ukraine who have crossed the border into Russia. So we are ministering through evangelical churches in Russia as they minister to displaced people as they move through Russia, as a result of them leaving Ukraine. So we're working through churches on both sides of the equation here as they minister to people, displaced people who find themselves in a situation where they've lost everything and they find themselves in a different country. So the church is doing its job over there, and again, many people are coming to faith in Christ. So I would say that the relationship between the Ukrainians and the Russians, they have certain disagreements perhaps on views of the war, but they have not broken their unity. And so as a ministry, we're hosting a conference in a neutral country in about a month and a half where we're inviting all the leaders from all the churches of the former Soviet Union for a time of fellowship and prayer and Bible teaching, so that they can continue to reaffirm their relationship to one another, particularly after the many years they spent under communist persecution. Again, the wall came down 30 years ago.
I was going to say, if it's outside of Russia, will there be problems for them being able to get visas to travel outside of Russia?
In this situation, no. In this case, no. Everybody would be able to leave their countries to this particular location.
And you're holding this, you say, in about a month's time.
It's going to be the first 2 weeks of October or so. Yeah, so a little more than a month. Yeah. And on the outreach that you're doing to try to get help to the churches in Ukraine and other places, are you mentioned that in some cases you just transfer money there. Are you able to find the supplies given the supply chain challenges that a number of countries have had? Yeah, I didn't think that was possible, but even in the midst of the war, the churches in Ukraine and many of those areas, even in the eastern part of the country, were able to procure resources. And there's certain churches and organizations that started this humanitarian aid distribution effort back in 2014 when the conflict initially broke out, and we have been, equipping them with funds so that they can purchase food for quite some time. So they're pretty resourceful, but again, in those cases where they can't purchase food locally, we're able to get it shipped in from Poland to their general area where they can come and pick it up via pallets and then go out and minister to people that are in need.
And how is the Slavic Gospel Association funded?
We're funded through, a variety of donors, through churches, through foundations, so, we're a typical parachurch ministry, and, we have prayer partners, but we also have financial partners. And when this broke out, we put the word out, and we were overwhelmed with response to our appeals because many people and many new people came to our ministry because what they recognized was the fact that we were not just delivering food. We were not just meeting physical needs, but through the churches, people were hearing the gospel. Their spiritual needs were being met. They were being ministered to by these loving Christians, and again, many of them came to faith in Christ, and that's important to the people that support this ministry.
Right. Given the revival that's going on, are you responsible for trying to ship Bibles in there? Given difficult times, people may not have the money. So, are you trying to ship Bibles into those areas as well?
Well, we have our administrative office and warehouse outside of Kiev. We have a huge supply of Bibles, so we continue to, we equip the churches with language-appropriate Christian literature and Bibles, and that is available through our distribution network that is based in Kiev. And we also have a seminary. We also have a seminary in outside of Kiev as well called European Biblical Seminary. And that particular school we've been funding for many years. We funded the construction of it, but it was blown up early on in the conflict. And just as an aside, it was being used as humanitarian outreach in Irpin, and people would come and stay, and they still had power, so they were able to charge their phones, and Yes. And it was warm and get food, and but not too long ago they had built a basement storage area in the basement that was fully enclosed by cement. So when the bombs started falling, there was about 120 people in that space, and they targeted the seminary building and they blew up the top part of it, but not one person was in that basement.
A miracle, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Are the classes still continuing? Are they able to continue classes even if they're off campus in some way?
We will be. We were able to seal the roof off, so we will be able to continue classes both at the site as well as remotely. People still have a thirst for knowledge, and people still want to be trained for ministry. And and you asked about Russia. We continue to fund the work in Russia in terms of, theological training and church planting and evangelism and so on and so forth, even in spite of this, Christ is building his church.
And Michael, in the little bit of time we have left, is the SGA based here in the United States?
Yes, we're in Loves Park, Illinois, which is right outside of Rockford, Illinois. But we have an office in Canada and Great Britain and New Zealand and Australia.
And how can our listeners reach out to you if they want to help or find out more about your organization?
You can go to our website. It is sga.org. That's sga.org.
And there's ability to donate funds, and if they want to, can they donate things other than funds? Are there provisions, or do you just need the money because you can't get the provisions transferred?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to transfer humanitarian aid over in those countries now. So typically, when it comes to clothing and those kinds of things, we raise the money and we'll transfer it over to them, and they'll purchase it locally. It's a lot more efficient, less expensive way to do it.
Well, Michael Johnson, president of the Slavic Gospel Association, thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on that information.